Hey, what's up? It's Soup here, and welcome to my Mythic Sylvanas Kyrian Arcane Mage commentary guide. I skipped ahead a few bosses because I felt like this one is the most challenging, and because both Guardian and KT were incredible disappointments. I'll still be putting out commentary guides for those fights, but I wanted to start with this one first. So let's get to it. First thing I want to go over is arcane power timings. You can see here, I used arcane power twice in phase 1, then on both of the ad platforms in phase 2, then again on the first platform in phase 3, then making sure to line my last arcane power up with lust. I've also seen this timing when going through logs, which seems to be focused on maximizing AoE damage in phase 1 by using the third arcane power on the intermission chains in the middle, then using the next 2 on the phase 2 boss burns. The way I did it focuses on priority ad damage in phase 2, while doing it the other way will give you more boss damage. I think both are effective strategies. It just comes down to what your raid needs in terms of damage. All right, let's get into the fight. Starting before the pull, it's really important to get a clear casting proc because you don't have a whole lot of time to prep for the second magi use in this phase. You also want to precast mirror images on pull, and the reason for that is prismatic barrier is enough of a defensive for standing in the withering fire during arcane power. However, if you do get shadow dagger, that will pretty much destroy your prismatic barrier and you'll take a decent amount of damage, so precasting mirror images helps to mitigate that. So with no clear casting proc, I go ahead precast rune and lust, and then I roll into arcane power, and you can see here that mirror images plus prismatic barrier is more than enough to deal with the withering fire by itself. And then after I get the second barrage out during arcane power, I go ahead and use presence of mind, and the reason for that is to quickly build up charges, because the goal before chains go out is to get to as many barrage stacks as I can with 4 charges, so I can use those on the chains and pull clear casting procs to use on the boss while I move to the lock gate. No luck on the clear casting proc. The chains spawn, I barrage orb barrage, and then start building stacks before I use the lock gate. And then something important to note, I think it's a good idea to use the lock gate at about 3 seconds left on the weak aura, and the reason for that is because the time between this lock gate and the next lock gate to bait the third veil to diamond is a pretty tight timer. I think it's about a minute and a half. So your lock gate debuff cooldown will be just coming up as you use the next lock gate. So I go ahead and use the lock gate, and because I destroyed my mana, I evocate. The boss ports for veil, I finish evocating, I alter time and blink out, finish building stacks, and then immediately snap back with alter and begin my mini ramp. An important note for this is you need to snap back with alter as soon as the veil finishes casting, and the reason for that is the withering fire goes out fairly quickly and you have just enough time to get the 5th arcane blast out during the ramp if you snap back immediately. And then after that ramp is done, at this point I'm building to 4 charges and 18 stacks in preparation for the next arrows that go out. At this point in the fight, I check my bleed stacks, and if I'm at 2 or more, I'll generally use file to avoid getting picked to be chained. The reason I do this is because I use file in phase 1 to remove my bleed stacks in order to allow other people to get chains and reduce the raid damage. Using file before the chains goes out takes you off the list, passing chains to someone else with stacks, and has the added benefit of making it easier to prep for the next arcane power. All right, and then at this point, I'm gonna swap the footage over to a different pull where I did get Wailing Arrow. Basically, what you're gonna do is as you run out, you'll know that you have Wailing Arrow. So you can see here that I'm kind of standing off to the side. The first person with the arrow standing in the middle, they dropped it there. I moved towards the middle to try and spawn them roughly where the first person spawned them, and then I blink towards the boss to get some distance before casting ring. And then another thing to note at this point in the fight, if you have evocate up still or a mana gem, or you're just good on mana, you can fish for some clear casting procs before the veil goes out, because it'll make building to 18 stacks after it's done easier. So I'm standing near blue, but I'm making sure to stand away from both the right and the left group. It's very important to pay close attention to the say bubbles, but as you can see, there are some people in our raid that for whatever reason, their say bubble is not announcing that they need to be chained. So it's a good idea to actually look at the characters and try to position yourself to not steal somebody's chain. So I go ahead and barrage, orb, barrage, and then I target the boss using the frame on the upper right and begin building barrage stacks. For this Wailing Arrow, the goal is to get the sentinels to spawn somewhere around the middle of the room. And the reason for that is because you drop a ring of frost in between the boss and where the shades are spawning, and that gives fixated people an opportunity to kite their mob into the ring of frost. And then when the sentinels are all grouped up, you can use other AoE CC and burn them down. I blink in and and I use missiles in that global, but I should have casted Ring of Frost. As you can see, that Sentinel got a little close. So I go ahead and use Arcane Power at this point, and you can see that I'm not focusing the Sentinels at all. And the reason for that is after the nerf to their health, my raid didn't need any help killing them. And if you wait to use Arcane Power, there's a good chance that you might get hit by the Withering Fire when it starts going out. So at this point of the fight, I'm moving over towards the second lock gate. You can see that my debuff from the first lock gate is just about to drop off as that Veil timer is coming up. I take the lock gate and use File of Serenity to clear my bleed stacks because Chains 3 is coming up. I usually use Presence of Mind to build to 4 charges and 18 stacks and prep for the next arrows that go out. But as you can see, the boss's health is under 85%. So there was a hard stop on DPS called. And then again, I'm going to go ahead and swap the footage over to a different pull. For this Wailing Arrow, I got the third one. So I like to precast Ring and then use Alter Time. And then as soon as the second arrow went off or whatever the previous arrow is, you blink, spawn the ads, and then alter back away from them. And it makes it really easy to kite if you happen to get fixated to kite that Sentinel into the Ring of Frost. So I go ahead and use Orb on the arrows and I hold on to those charges for the shades. For this Wailing Arrow, the goal is really just to get it off away from the group. So if you can just try and drop all of the arrows in about the same location, obviously the people with the arrows need to stagger moving to that location, but dropping them all in roughly the same location, and then the raid needs to stand opposite the boss or just opposite the Rings of Frost or AoE CC that's on the ground and kite their Sentinel into it. As the first arrow goes out, I put Ring of Frost down, and it looks like 2 of the Sentinels completely dodged the Ring of Frost. So I Frost Nova them, and you want to make sure to be on the lookout for casting Slow or Frost Nova to save your friends if they're getting close to their fixate target. And then if you aren't fixated by a Sentinel, you should absolutely run into the middle of all of them and start using Arcane Explosion. I like to use Alter Time and Blink Out for this one because it lets me plant and cast and build to 18 stacks to get ready for the intermission. The reason you want to use immunities at this point is because immunities both remove the barbed arrow stacks from the person with the immunity and makes that person immune to the raid-wide pulsing damage, so it reduces the overall damage taken to the raid by quite a lot. And then while I'm building stacks and getting prepared for the next phase, I want to go over Invis use in phase 1. I think Invis is probably best used for Wailing Arrow if you get targeted, but it can also help reduce the damage you take from Shadow Dagger when that goes out. Getting into phase 2, I precast mirror images about 5 seconds into the phase, and the reason for that is it's still up for the first platform by the time we get there to avoid pulling threat, so I can start my ramp immediately as well as mitigate damage if I get Crushing Dread, but it also puts it on cooldown early enough that it should be up for the third platform. On this pull, we ended up crushing the first couple of platforms, which caused it to not quite be up by the third platform. So I think precasting mirror images as soon as you get done with the teleport into phase 2 is probably a safe play. Something that's really important in this phase is when you walk across the bridge, I think it's a really good idea to try and line up a blink to try and get ahead of the group, so it gives you time to pre-position and start your ramp. So when you get to this platform, you want to start your ramp as soon as possible because there's a veil that goes out very shortly after you do, but you should be able to at least get to the barrage before Veil goes out. And you can see here that I should have swapped targets to the Goliath because the barrage fizzled out because the Soul Judge died before it hit. Okay, so at this point, because my raid was doing really well on these first 2 platforms, I stopped being able to use Magi for the first boss burn. So the goal before moving to the next platform is to prep with 18 stacks and at least 2 charges so you can use Rune and Spark together as a mini CD usage. All right, now I'm moving across the bridge, and I absolutely should have lined up a blink towards the end of the bridge because as you'll see, I almost missed the barrage because I started my ramp too late. And at this point, I use Presence of Mind because I was slow getting to the platform so I can keep casting while dodging the wave. And then make sure you wait for all of the veils to spawn before you use the gate so you don't accidentally drop one on your raid. And then the goal at this point is to get one more 18 stack barrage out before she goes immune, and then get as many clear casting procs as you can leading up to the next platform to make sure Arcane Power is up right when you get there. The The reason why we hang back on this platform is because the timers for the orbs doesn't start until you actually step onto the platform, and the timers for the mobs starts as they spawn. So we dodge the waves standing on the bridge and give everybody a chance to catch up, and then we move onto the platform together. And then this platform is by far the most dangerous of the two, so it's a good idea to be ready to use Invis or all of your defensives. Unfortunately, Mirror Images wasn't quite up as I was running across the bridge, but after I casted the barrage and blinked out of Veil, I absolutely should have used Prismatic Barrier and Images and Invis because I get Crushing Dread on me. And then at this point, you just want to build 18 stacks and start prepping for a mini burn on the boss. All right, so for this platform, the way that I like to play it is I blink over the wave, and then I stand near the gate, and then I go ahead and use Alter Time before using the gate, and then as soon as the Veil finishes casting, I snap back and immediately begin my ramp. The benefit for this is that it will let you consistently get the 5th Arcane Blast for this boss burn, as well as give you a chance to include some of the adds in funnel damage. That chance is low, but it's still a chance. And then I go ahead and I cast whatever barrage I have right before the boss goes immune. After the whale goes off, you want to go ahead and start CCing these adds. There's not really any use in dealing damage to them or building stacks because there's plenty of time to build barrage stacks when you get to the first platform in phase 3. It's important for this transition that you use the boss frame to target Sylvanas instead of trying to use the nameplate like I do here because I missed my global. For the first platform, the first thing you're gonna have to do is dodge pools, and then Veil is coming up, so I start moving towards my assigned Veil spot. And you can see that there's a puddle on top of my spot, so I end up standing somewhat off to the side, and the tank takes that spot when he picks up the puddles. After Veil goes out, I blink to the center because that's where the boss is going to be when Banshee's Fury starts going out, and use Arcane Power. One thing I want to point out is if you precast Mirror Images in phase 2 and then use Mirror Images again on the 3rd platform, Mirror Images will be back up in time for that first Banshee's Fury in phase 3. I just forgot to cast it before the Banshee's Fury went out. As you can see here, I used the ERT Weak Aura timer to remind me of what to do with this arrow. The reason for that is because I rarely got targeted by it, and each of the I think 2 times that I didn't feel like I did very well on it, so I use ERT Weak Aura timers to help me remember exactly how to play certain mechanics. When I get to this platform, I go ahead and move to my assigned Veil location, but I'm ready to blink if I get targeted by the arrow. I see that the 2nd arrow went out on somebody else, so if I do get the arrow, it's going to be the 3rd one. So I do get targeted by the arrow. I blink to the inside track because I'm going to be jumping to the 3rd and then 4th platform. And you want to make sure to use Alter Time for this because as you'll see, it is hilariously broken. I'm waiting for the 1st arrow to go off. I then jump over with the 2nd person, then jump to the 3rd platform. Then I wait for my arrow to land before snapping back and blinking into my Veil spot. You can see that the 2nd arrow barely did any damage and the 3rd arrow barely broke Prismatic Barrier. Stay in place for Veil. As soon as Veil goes out, blink to the center so we can start spreading those stacks out and begin the next ramp because Banshee's Fury is coming up. Something to note for phase 3, I think it's worth it holding Invis just in case you get Death Knives because it does an insane amount of damage and your ice block will probably be assigned already. So at this point, I'm building to 18 stacks and 4 charges, and I plan on using that with Rune by itself after the 3rd Veil before the Raise cast. Third Veil goes off, didn't go very well, but I go ahead and drop my Rune, cast a full barrage, and then start building to 18 stacks, so I'm ready to use Arcane Power as soon as I get to the next platform. Evocate on the move, and jump. There's another Banshee's Fury. So at this point, I know that the next soaks that are coming up, I have to do with Alter Time. Stand in my soak, I hit Alter Time, I reactivate it midair, and as you can see, despite having reactivated it to snap back, it seems to have canceled. I got incredibly lucky with landing right in between the two veils and not making that go really, really horribly, but it absolutely could have. I'm not 100% sure why Alter Time did that. It did that to me twice that night. The only theory that I have is that similar to Blood Price on Denathrius, you can't use Alter Time that far in the air, but it's not that far in the air, so I'd be really surprised if that was the case. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure why that happened, but I got incredibly lucky. All right, and then at this point, the immunity soak is coming up, so I have to ice block the immunity soak. And then you can see on my ERT weak aura timer that the plan is to use Spark by itself after I immune soak. The reason I do this is to put combat meditation on cooldown, because I use a mini burn when I get to the next platform, and if combat meditation procs off that, it won't be up for lust. You can tell I absolutely was not prepared for the tank to get dispelled at that point, and I panicked and did not blink to a very good spot and shared some of the veil stacks. So the first thing you're gonna have to deal with on this platform is arrows. Even if you do get targeted by an arrow, you're still able to use Magi and have it come back up for lust. I got lucky and did not get targeted by an arrow, so I go ahead and build 18 stacks and start my mini burn. And the reason you don't lust for about 45 seconds on this platform is because you have an entire round of every mechanic that's in this phase that goes out, and then you have a large window of uptime immediately after that. So after these death knives, you want to spread out to your veil locations. You're gonna have a scream, then dodge pools. Into veil. And then lust and burn. At this point in the fight, you only have one set of mechanics left to deal with. You have one more set of arrows, death knives, and then a Banshee's Fury. It is incredibly important that the people that get death knives do not aim it over the lock gate on the other side of the platform or on top of the raid.
Double, that's a...
Come on.
Anybody dies, res.
Dispel Swizz, Dispel Swizz.
Dispel
Stack up.
Lada.
Stay stacked, stay stacked.
Get these dispels, we're good. Health stone, health pot. Yep. That's it. Boys.
Come on, let's go. Let's go. No way. Yes.
And the fight is that easy. All right, that's it for this fight. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something, the best way you can support this channel for free is to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, or you can feel free to join my Discord and I can answer questions there. Thank you for watching, and I hope this guide helps, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.